For more, let's bring in today's political panel, Republican strategist Lance Trover and the president of Corcoran Street Group, Brad Howard. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on set today. Lance, I want to start with you. This $400 million, universities can point to the research they do, the grants that they give. Is it a problem to be cutting this much money from a university?
No, absolutely not. I mean, when you think about this, I mean, these are universities that have tolerated anti-Semitism on their campus for a long time. And I would just go to, I think the larger story is exactly what Leo's talking about here, is what's to come. Because take AMP, American Muslims for Palestine. They are a group with deep ties to Hamas, both funding and their leadership. They fund SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, the ringleaders of all these protests. So essentially, these protests on these campuses are Hamas funded. So I think the message to these universities is, if you've been tolerating anti-Semitism and you've been putting up with this stuff, with all these protests on the campus, then guess what? The boom's about to get lowered on you by Donald Trump. You better buckle up.
And Brad, these persistent protests, what have they meant? The protesters, they think that they say that they are putting a spotlight on an awful situation in Gaza, but it has brought a lot of negative attention to them as well.
Well, it feels a little disingenuous because the protests tend to be about the protesters and not about the people of Gaza. So I think that's a problem. And number two, protests seem to be reeking of anti-Semitism, which is a major problem, which is a major problem with these so-called protests. And so, do I think these protests should not be violent? Absolutely. Do I think they should not be anti-Semitic? Absolutely. Do I trust Donald Trump to be the arbiter of truth and justice? No. And so I think that's the problem here. I do think these campuses have got to do a better job of cracking down on violence, on breaking and entering, and all the other stuff you see associated with some of these movements. But let's keep in mind, I wish the Republican Party were just as committed to ridding themselves of anti-Semitism on their side as they are on our side. It's a problem in both parties.
Lance, this was a week, the president's address to Congress. Democrats brought signs. They've now recorded a video with these video game fighter poses. I mean, this has just got to be great for Republicans.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time really worrying about Brad's party. Sorry, dude. But
we spend too much time worried about yours.
This is more than just a PR problem. To me, this is a values problem within the Democratic Party. I mean, they are living in this pre-November 5th world that's just controlled by the far left of their party. You had 45 U.S. senators this week vote and say it's okay for boys to play in girls' sports. It's an 80% issue in this country. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So if the Democrats want to just keep running around saying Donald Trump bad and telling 80% of the country that boys should play in girls' sports, or we should help illegal immigrants stay in this country, then they should do that. But I don't think that's going to work out very well for them. And at some point, it seems to me, the voters are just going to tune them out as a party.
Brad, it seems like this is the type of video that you would do when you don't have the other party that is overhauling the federal government in a way that your party does not like. I mean, is there any consistency here? How should Democrats approach this?
Well, everyone say I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And the thing about social media and new technology, you're always trying to adapt to the moment and change. And if you're going to test things out, do them now as furthest away from the election as possible. So when they go wrong, you're fine. But what I will say is, it is not transgender Americans that are causing the rising price in eggs. It is not transgender Americans that are making people worry about Social Security or Medicare. It is not transgender Americans that's making folks worry about services to the VA and the VA suicide hotline not being funded. All of that is Donald Trump and congressional Republicans' refusal to hold Trump and Musk accountable. And the Republicans keep saying this, the far left of these town halls. It's not. It's real Republicans, their own base voters, which is why you're seeing Donald Trump soften his language and put some restrictions on Elon Musk for the first time. I think he's starting to acknowledge the reality that a lot of grassroots Americans across this country, everyday working Americans, are angry, upset, and worried that what he's doing may make matters worse and lead to higher prices, which is what he campaigned he would fix.
Lance, we've got another deadline coming up. Government is part of it is set to shut down on Friday. Republicans have just released their bill to try to avoid that. Democrats might provide any votes for this. Do you think that Republicans, with their very narrow majority in the House, can keep the government open?
I think Mike Johnson is the most underestimated person in this town. I mean, this wailing and hair on fire, this happens all the time with him. And can he get it done? Can he get it across the border? And he seems to do it every single time. So I have confidence in him as a speaker. He always performs and steps up and gets it over the line. I think that'll happen here.
The one difference is he had a president committed to signing whatever Congress passed. I think that's the X factor here.
Well, this just came in. Truth Social from President Trump. The House and Senate have put together, under the circumstances, a very good bill funding the CR. All Republicans should vote yes. Please vote yes next week. You've got to constantly Truth Social in this.
And that's today.
I want to turn a little bit to what's been going on with Elon Musk and Doge, the president, acknowledging that there needs to be a scalpel to all of this. How cautious do Republicans need to be? And this is for both of you. We'll start with you, Lance. How cautious do Republicans need to be here? It's very rare for a House, a Senate, and a White House to all be one party, and then for that to stay consistent through the midterms.
I think some of this is a little bit of much to do about very little. I mean, if you heard Musk on Rogan talk about his role here, I mean, it is an advisory role. And look, there is one chief executive. It is Donald Trump, the buck stops with him. And I would just remind everyone, 75% of this country supports Doge and its efforts. And so while there may be a change in review and how this is going to come out, I don't think we're going to see the cuts stop, because Americans want to see change with the bureaucracy here in Washington. It's one of the top issues in this country that they want to get done. So I think they'll continue on. We'll see some of these cuts move forward.
Yeah, that same polling says that Americans are concerned they're moving too rash and too fast and not thinking through the consequences. So there is a growing concern among Americans, as they should be, because efficiency doesn't mean cuts. Efficiency means, can you get the highest ROI out of the lowest dollar possible? They are doing no analysis on return on investment. And in fact, if they did, they wouldn't have fired the persons guarding our nuclear energy and our nuclear security. They wouldn't have fired the people at the FAA that we need to land planes safely. They wouldn't have fired food inspectors. Like, they're learning the hard way here, but Americans are caught up in the midst of their trial and error method here of going after government when they should have. And by the way, you mentioned Congress. Congress is doing nothing here. And I think that's what you're seeing Americans show up at town halls and express concern for. Like, where are the checks and balances? Why are you not holding them accountable? And when you don't do that, you have an executive that runs amok and doesn't take into account the impact on people, because they're looking at numbers, whereas, as a campaign operative, I'm looking at people.
6 or 7 weeks in, guys. 6 or 7 weeks in. Lance Trover, Brad Howard, thank you for joining us. Much appreciated.